I think it's just getting more comfortable with it. I'm assuming the more questions that I start to drill, it'll just naturally come easier. And if I practice just trusting my gut and going through and answering the questions.
That's exactly it. You want to learn to go with your gut. And if you take what we discussed here, I think that you getting 20 points in the next 7 weeks is more than doable.
This is Erica, and she's looking to go from a 150 to a 170 in the next 7 weeks. My name is Steve Schwartz, and I've been teaching the LSAT for the past 20 years. Today, Erica's going to bring me her biggest LSAT challenges, and I'll help her address them as she looks to improve by 20 points.
Where are you scoring right now?
The last practice test that I did, which was about 2 weeks ago, it was the 150, which is where I started at. I guess I've technically only been in this program for a week and a half.
Cool. And what's your goal?
The goal is always 100%.
Of course.
But I would be happy with a 170, and that would be great.
Of course. All right. So we're looking to get you 20 points. And how long do we have till test day?
About 7 weeks.
7 weeks. So just under 2 months. Mm-hmm. And how many hours can you put in between now and then?
About 4 to 6 hours a day, not including the one-on-one tutoring that I have that's an hour, and attending the study sessions and then the group student sessions.
That's plenty. That's a good amount of time to achieve the increase you're looking for over that time frame. Now, you mentioned earlier getting familiar with the different stimulus types. When you say stimulus types, do you mean methods of reasoning, or do you mean question stem types?
The question step type. So like, do I recognize that it's a sufficient or is it necessary, or am I looking for, parallel reasoning and things like those, the ones that aren't exactly obvious.
Okay. Now, is it difficulty in recognizing which type of question you're dealing with, or is it more how to approach a given question type?
What type of question I'm dealing with off the top of it.
Okay, so for example, would it be like difficulty with necessary assumption versus sufficient assumption?
Yeah.
Got it. But you're clear on how to approach them. It's just a matter of recognizing the type.
Yes, I understand the differences when it's necessary. It just needs to be completing the argument. It has to make the argument make sense, not necessarily proving the conclusion. And the sufficient is proving the conclusion always.
Good. Yeah. So for sufficient assumption, as you said, we want to guarantee the conclusion 100%, make the argument airtight. For necessary assumption, it's something that needs to be true in order for the argument to work. Now, I can give you a little trick to tell the difference in terms of question stems. You want to hear it?
Yes.
Okay. The key is the word or phrase in the question stem that will be either synonymous with necessity or sufficiency. And so for necessary assumption, the key words or phrases would include most often depends upon, requires, and assumes. On the flip side, sufficient assumption questions will have words or phrases synonymous with sufficiency, like allows, enables, follows logically if assumed, and properly inferred if assumed. And so that if in those phrases is your sufficient indicator in that case.
Yeah, that's what I'm learning going over I think it's like the keywords process that you guys have in the program, and making sure that I kind of go back to that too.
Exactly. And you can drill this. You can great. Yeah, so you can certainly go into the course for a refresher on the keywords, but it's as simple as that. And once you just drill those, memorize them if you have to. I'm not big on flashcards overall for LSAT prep, but it could be useful in this particular case. The good news is like the recognition is actually the easier part to master. The harder part, in my view, is knowing what to do or how to approach it. Because you're having trouble with the easier part, we lock that down, you're going to get a boost. Are there other question types where you have particular trouble distinguishing the type that you're dealing with?
Strengthening and weakening, I definitely get those confused. And I think because when I'm trying to find something to strengthen, my brain automatically finds out where's the weak point. And then when I start to read some of the questions, I confuse myself, and then I'm like, okay, I know what the weak point is. Am I supposed to be finding a weakness or strengthening? And then I have to go back and reread the question, and then that's where I stumble on those.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're habitually inclined to go into arguments looking to weaken them, even if they're asking you to strengthen.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to make a great cross-examiner if that's the route you want to go. You want to tear things apart and knock them down. It could just be that after you evaluate the argument, maybe you're prone to look for weakeners. And so then you got to do an extra little check back to the question stem just remind yourself of what the task at hand is. And the cool thing is that strengthen and weaken are opposite sides of the same coin. So just flip it, or take the opposite of what you were thinking, because the opposite of a weakener would be a strengthener and vice versa. So maybe it's just a matter of adjusting your process slightly. When it comes to LSAT prep, sometimes the smartest move is the one that feels the most counterintuitive. You've got to stop pushing for a second and hit reset. Most students think the path to a higher score is a straight line. More hours, more questions, more coffee, and repeat. But here's the reality. If you keep stacking study sessions on top of mental fatigue, you're not getting sharper, you're just getting more tired. And when you're tired, you make dumb mistakes that you would never make if you were fresh. And so, we built into our students' study plans something called a reset week. It's not a vacation where you do nothing though, it's a deliberate recalibration. You take the pressure off of high volume drilling and put the focus back on fundamentals, review, and restoring your mental sharpness. The first step is to strip it back to the essentials. I want you to forget about cramming 5 timed sections a day. For this week, you go back to your core weaknesses and work them slowly. No stopwatch, no panic, just clean reps. For example, instead of rushing through a full logical reasoning section, you might spend an hour on 8 or 10 questions writing out why each wrong answer is wrong. And I know it's slower, but that's the point. You are rebuilding your precision. The next step is to clear out the mental clutter. A reset week is not about fewer questions, it's about clearing your head. That means cutting out study habits that are more about anxiety than improvement. So no more highlighting every word in reading comp. No more rereading the same stimulus 3 times because you just don't feel ready to answer it. We're keeping the good habits and tossing out the bad ones that slow you down. Then you fix the small leaks. Because when you're in the middle of that daily grind, it's easy to overlook the tiny, consistent errors that quietly bleed points. A reset week is the perfect time to fix them. For example, are you misreading question stems? Are you rushing through conditional logic without fully diagramming? Are you always falling for most versus some traps? So one by one, you're going to plug those leaks, and that's often worth more points than any heroic last-minute cram session. And the next step is to rebuild your confidence, because a big part of a reset is psychological. If you've been stuck at the same score for weeks, you start believing that's your ceiling. So if you could slow down and get consistent wins on untimed focused work, you remind yourself, I actually know this stuff. And that shift in confidence carries over when you turn the clock back on. Now, the final step is to ease back into full speed, because the reset week, of course, is not the end goal, it's the pit stop. Once you've sharpened your accuracy and shaken off the bad habits, you start reintroducing timed sections. But now, you're fresher, you're faster, and you're more intentional with your strategy. Think of it like an elite athlete taking a light training week before a big meet. They're not getting lazy, they're priming themselves to peak when it matters, and the LSAT's no different. So if you're getting tired, burned out, or you feel like every section is just a rerun of your last one, don't keep grinding, take the reset. Your future self and your future score will thank you. What else? Any other types?
Explain and resolve. I miss about half of them and I get about half of them right. And I'm not sure why just yet.
Have you put a lot of time into those yet, do you think?
No, these are just my notes from the last practice tests that I took. I did 2 of them at the same time, one day and then one the next day, and just went through and looked at the questions that I received that were correct and wrote down what the type that it was. And if right now, going back through drilling it, did I know that it was right? Did I assume that it was right? And breaking down why the other answers were wrong. So these were just some of the questions that I know that I got halfway wrong, halfway right. So in my point of view is, I might not completely understand it, but some of them I kind of understand if it's an easier question.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, based on what you've shared with me so far, if you're at a 150 right now and you want to get to 170 range, correcting the earlier issues we discussed is going to be more impactful for you than covering resolve. Not saying resolve isn't important, because everything's important if you want a 170 plus, but if you could be crystal clear on sufficient versus necessary assumption, crystal clear on your approach for weaken and strengthen, those are some of the most common question types. Resolve is a lot less common, and so the higher yield area for you is going to be the more common types. Every LSAT student has had that moment. You set your stopwatch, take a section, finish in just under 35 minutes, and you still bomb half the hard questions. Then you think to yourself, okay, I just need to get faster. That could not be more wrong though. Speed is not the magic bullet. Accuracy is. If your accuracy is shaky, going faster just means you'll make mistakes quicker. And that's not progress, that's just a more efficient way to tag your score. So what you want to do is flip the usual order. Most students try to fix timing first, then accuracy. But we do the opposite with our students. First, we drill accuracy until it's automatic. Why? Because once your reasoning's solid, speed naturally improves. You don't have to think through every step. You've seen the patterns so many times, your brain fills in the gaps. Then you've got to diagnose the real problem. Bad timing can come from 3 different issues: overthinking, misreading, and hesitation. Overthinking is reading every word twice before you dare to choose an answer. Misreading is when you have to backtrack because you misunderstood the argument or the passage. And hesitation is knowing the right answer, but then talking yourself out of it. And if you don't figure out which one you're doing, you're gonna waste weeks practicing timing without fixing the root cause. What you wanna do is use timing as a pressure test, not the main event. It's the stress test, not the workout. Drill accuracy, then use the clock to see where your reasoning cracks under pressure. Then what you want to do is build pacing checkpoints, where instead of obsessing over the full 35 minutes, you break it down. For example, you solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes, build a time bank you can apply to the tougher questions later that truly need it. This way, you can spot pacing problems mid-section and adjust on the fly, instead of realizing you've got 5 questions left and 90 seconds to answer them all. I also want you to kill the myth of perfect speed. A lot of students will believe they've got to hit an exact pace on every question, but some questions are designed to be solved in 20 seconds, and others might take 2 to 4 minutes, and that's okay. The skill isn't moving at a constant speed, it's knowing when to speed up and when to slow down. And so if your timing strategy is just go faster, you're not fixing anything, you're just burning out faster. Instead, think of timing as the last 5 or 10% of your prep. The first 90-95% is mastering the test so deeply that speed becomes a side effect rather than the goal. Hey, real quick guys, if you're just getting started with your LSAT prep or you're looking for a quick refresher, you can grab your free easy LSAT cheat sheet linked below this video. It's jam-packed full of concrete actionable tactics you can take and apply to your LSAT prep for a quick score boost, and it's 100% free, so you can grab your copy below. And now, back to the show. How are you on inference? By that I mean like must be true and most supported.
Those ones are good. I think I get about like 80% of those questions correct. I haven't tackled them completely just yet.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I would definitely recommend finish those off, tackle those completely, because if you can get to 100 on those, that's gonna be an enormous lift for you. What about reading comp? How are you feeling about that?
Terrible.
Really?
Yeah.
That's in a way good news because we have an area to work on. So what's your current reading a comp approach like?
Read it 5 million times until I understand something that maybe looks like one of those answers could possibly be true.
Okay, so you find yourself rereading a lot.
Yes.
When you read, what are you reading for? What are you looking for?
Before I was just reading the passage to see was there a conclusion and kind of what's the point of it. I guess mostly just main points. And then after watching some of the videos that you guys have done and the information that you have, I'm trying to look for now specific words that give me clues, whether it's evidence, like is it just background information? Is it a fact? Where is the conclusion? Is there a sub-conclusion type of thing? And then seeing if I can cut out any sentences that are just fillers that I really don't even need to read it because what's either behind it or in front of it is going to negate any of that anyways. So that way I can read less and have more time to get to the questions. If I do need to go back, I know exactly like which paragraph I should go back to find that information.
A lot of students treat reading comprehension and even logical reasoning like they're reading their favorite mystery novel. They'll go line by line, savoring every detail, waiting for the big reveal at the end. The problem is, the LSAT is not entertainment. It's an obstacle course, and reading it like you would read Harry Potter is the fastest way to run out of time, miss details, and leave points on the table. When you're reading on the LSAT, your goal is not to get into the story. Your goal is to understand the structure and purpose behind what's being said. By structure, I mean how the passage is built. By purpose, I mean why the author wrote it. Once you can nail these, you can answer most questions without having to reread every word. Think of each LSAT passage like a skeleton. There are a few key bones, the main point, the author's opinion, any shifts in perspective that hold the whole thing together. Everything else, the fancy vocabulary, the specific examples, that's just the skin, it's the surface level. It's nice to have, but it's not essential for knowing how the body moves. And so we train our students to find the core skeleton, the spine, on the first read. This way, even if they forget a detail, they'll know exactly where to go back to find it. Now, of course, when it comes to the questions, you're not going to know exactly what they'll ask before you read, but you can certainly anticipate the major types or categories. You're going to see main point, author's tone, detail lookup questions, and inference questions. That's pretty much the menu. So as you read, I want you to mentally flag things that feel like they could be question bait. This will keep you actively engaged instead of zoning out halfway through paragraph 2. Now, the final thing I'll say, and this one shocks people, don't aim for 100% comprehension. You do not need to understand every single sentence on the first pass. What you need is the big picture of what's going on, a mental map of where the details live, and an awareness of the author's attitude. Anything else you can skim or skip until the question sends you back there. Good. So, a lot of your intuitions here sound pretty good to me. How much time have you put into reading comp relative to logical reasoning?
I have not put any in at all this past week and a half.
Okay. Yeah, so it might just be a matter of putting in the reps. Like, you can, of course, go work through the lesson videos covering the theory and the strategies, but then you've got to actually apply it, on actual passages to bring it to life. So this could just be a matter of needing to put in the reps and get the exposure to seeing how the strategies work in real time so that you can see what actually feels natural to you and works for you, because not every strategy will work for every student. And you've been reading your whole life, so a lot of habits are deeply ingrained, and you're going to have to see through exposure, in a way like a trial by fire, that LSAT reading comp is different from a lot of reading you do in other areas of life, both now and in the past, because you're not reading for information, you're not reading for content, you're reading for structure. You're looking to see how the author is going about making their argument and what role each statement plays in the whole. Most LSAT students do not properly review. They'll open their notes, skim a few highlights, nod to themselves, and think, yep, I remember this. But that's not real review. Real review, the kind that actually moves your score, feels uncomfortable by design. It forces you to go back into the problem as if you're solving it for the first time, except this time you interrogate every thought you had. And we sometimes have our students narrate their reasoning step by step like they're on a cooking show. First, I read the stimulus and noticed the conclusion at line 3. Then I saw the evidence but didn't check for gaps. That's where I slipped up. This is not about feeling good. It's about catching the exact moment your reasoning went off track. So here is a simple structure for a high-impact review session. First, identify the trigger. Where in the problem did your brain take a wrong turn? Was it a word you skimmed past? Was it a conditional that you flipped? Then, label the flaw. Give it a name, like irrelevant comparison, or confusion of necessary and sufficient, or confusion of correlation causation, for example. Then, rebuild the solution. By this I mean solve it again without looking at the correct answer until your reasoning is airtight. And finally, in your error log or mistake journal, write down a key takeaway, a single sentence that future you can read and instantly recall the lesson. If you do this for just 3 to 5 questions a day, you're going to start to recognize your own patterns faster than you think. And yes, it's slower than blasting through 50 questions and checking the answer key, but it's way more effective. Hey, real quick guys, a lot of you have been asking me how you can be featured in one of these LSAT study breakdowns and get feedback on your approach. The only way is to join one of my LSAT coaching programs. You can check out the links below to find out more and to book a call with me and my team. We'd be glad to help you out. And now back to the show.
I overthink it. I'm too maybe critical, and sometimes I get caught up. That's what I do, is I take too much time on those very first ones because I feel comfortable and I'm like, okay, I don't want to miss anything. That when it comes down to breaking down some of the answer choices, I'm like, okay, well, it could be wrong here, but it could be right here, and then kind of this, and then I go to the next one and kind of do the same thing, and then I like reread them again one more time. Even if I feel like I have the right answer, I'm just like, okay, let me just make sure that this is like the right one though. Even in the ones that I like completely understand with the inference ones, I still feel like I do that. So I probably take the same amount of time when I even have the right answer and I'm confident versus when I'm not sure what it is and then I just kind of have to pick one. Another thing that I've noticed, that I'm just taking up way too much time whether I'm confident or not confident.
I hear you on that. Do you consider yourself a type A personality? Because that's what I'm kind of getting here.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's that perfectionism, right? I get it. I'm the same way. And like, you want to get everything right. You feel like you can't afford to leave any points on the table, which I understand, of course. The thing is, on the LSAT, that backfires on you because the test is so severely time constrained. It is not reasonable for you to complete all the questions in the time allotted. And that applies even to those who have time and a half, right? It applies to those who have double time in some cases, right? Like, it's just too many questions, too much dense information. What you've got to learn to do is you've got to learn to let go, and you've got to learn to trust your gut and trust your abilities and aptitude, to the point that the easy questions, you've got them. You can go with your gut, and you can't afford to double check or triple check or quadruple check, because that will inevitably come at the expense of another question later that actually needs that time. Just go on to something else, because there is an enormous spectrum of difficulty on the LSAT. There are some stupidly easy questions that like a middle schooler could get right, and there are some that a master's or PhD level person is going to get wrong. You need to spend less than half the time on an easy question as you would on the hard one. And so if in 20, 30 seconds, your muscle memory tells you this is classic correlation causation reasoning or confusing necessary sufficient, I get it, then you can move on to something that has a much more complex trick or trap embedded within it. And then on reading comp too, I mean, there are going to be some passages where you like the topic and you feel comfortable with it and it's natural to you. And topic should not matter, but I'll admit that it does. When most people plateau on the LSAT, their instinct is, I just need to do more tests. And it certainly feels logical. I mean, if 10 tests got you to this score, wouldn't 20 tests get you even higher? Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Sometimes doing more tests without fixing the root problem is like putting more miles on a broken car. You're just wearing it down faster without getting anywhere new. The reality is, the LSAT is a mirror. It reflects your strengths and your weaknesses. If you keep taking it without pausing to actually fix those weaknesses, you're just reinforcing bad habits. And so this is one of the first interventions we make with our students, slowing down their practice test schedule until the foundation is solid. So instead of cranking out another full-length exam tomorrow, I want you to try cutting your volume. For now, one test a week might be plenty, and only if you're reviewing deeply. Then shift the balance. Spend at least twice as much time reviewing as you do taking the test. So if your test is taking you 2.5 hours with standard timing, plan for at least 5 hours of review. Now I want you to take your analysis of that test and start targeting the question types that kill your accuracy. Make those your daily reps until they stop being weaknesses. And finally, drill with purpose. Take the 1 or 2 question types that gave you the most trouble on that exam and drill those in small focused sets, maybe just, for example, 10 flaw questions back to back. The magic is not in the number of practice tests you've done, it's in what you do with them. And if you think this feels too slow, remember, the LSAT rewards precision, not hustle. You don't get extra points for sweating. Were you a more humanities person or a science person, do you think?
Science.
Science, cool. That's unique. A lot of pre-laws are the other way. And so like if science comes more naturally to you, maybe you see a social science or a law passage that just does not connect with you. And so you're going to have that instantaneous or instinctual like fear reaction to it. And that's normal. What that means is that maybe you want to go faster on the science passages, speed up there, because those will take you less than your average allotted time. So you have more time for the humanities ones that need the extra time. But the LSAT is as much a test of time management and judgment with how you allocate your time as it is just the content itself. What else?
I think it's just getting more comfortable with it. I'm assuming the more questions that I start to drill, whether they're through Law Hub, it'll just naturally come easier. And if I practice just trusting my gut and going through and answering the questions, if I check them later, because sometimes I'll answer a question and then I'll just be like, okay, but did I get it right? And then I'm like, okay, I didn't, so why did I not? But maybe I should just answer the 10 questions how I would if it was timed for those 10 questions, and then go back and check, okay, I felt it was right, and just make my annotations of like, I was completely confused or I was completely confident, I teeter-tottered on 2 answers, and then I can explain to myself later why.
That's exactly it. You want to learn to go with your gut. And if you take what we discussed here, I think that you getting 20 points in the next 7 weeks is more than doable. It becomes inevitable if you take what we talked about regarding, in particular, necessary versus sufficient question stem recognition, learning to go against your natural instincts on weaken and strengthen questions. So if you like weaken, flip it around. And lastly, I think reading comp is going to be another huge area of improvement for you if you take what we applied. How's the tutoring been going so far?
It's going really good. We've identified a couple of ways, mostly for the strengthening and weaken, because I feel like that is really like my weakest point. Ironically, just not getting confused, and there's a lot of those questions. Yeah, we set up a game plan. I know when my tutoring session's coming, and we're following along with the study plan that you guys provided to me. That way we can go through some of those, and then we set up for the next week, and then kind of go over how I felt, what I did, and go through those.
Most students hate looking at the questions they got wrong. It's uncomfortable, I get it. Your brain wants to skip past them and tell itself, that one was weird, I'll get it next time. The thing is, that's the LSAT equivalent of sweeping dirt under the rug. Truth is, your wrong answers are your gold mine. They are the roadmap showing you where exactly your next 5 to 10 points are hiding. But to mine that gold, you can't just glance at the explanation and move on. You've got to interrogate your own thinking. And so, when we work with students, we make them do what I call the post-mortem autopsy. First step is to restate the question in your own words without looking at the answers. Then pinpoint exactly why your reasoning went off the rails. Was it misreading a conditional statement? Was it mixing up necessary versus sufficient? Or was it just rushing? Then write down the lesson learned in a way your future self will understand. Not just read more carefully, but for example, always check if the conclusion is about X before eliminating Y. And then finally, build a mini drill based on that mistake so you can test yourself again in 48 hours. If you make this process a habit, your LSAT prep changes completely. Suddenly, every miss is a free coaching session with yourself. And yes, I know it's slow and it's tedious, but it works. You only need a handful of these lesson learned moments to permanently close the gap between your current score and your goal. Sounds like you're on track. Well, keep at it, Erica. If you have any questions or need anything at any point, always feel free to reach out. You can email, text anytime. I'm always happy to help.
Thank you.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Be well. Talk to you soon.